So there's a lot of things you can do with Rivage to really customize the workflow for any individual and how they like to interact with the desk. Can you walk through some of those common things that people like to change?
Sure. Well, there's a couple things. Like the old Yamaha way forever, I think, on the digital consoles is that when you're on a particular layer, when you select a channel and then you go to another layer, it remembers the last channel that you had selected when you were on that layer. If I go back to that first layer, it's this one. It's going to assume we want to pick up where we left off there. But sometimes, especially for monitor guys, they need to keep the star selected. Right. So how do you have that where you can change fader banks and it doesn't change your selected? Well, in preferences, in the second tab, surface settings 2, fader bank and the select link. Is the select linked to the fader bank or not? So you could turn it off for inputs, or maybe you turn it off for your outputs and your custom fader banks as well. So now where we have channel 1 selected, when I go to another layer, it's still channel 1 that's selected, right? So I can go and I can look at something else, but I still have my star as my selected channel, right?
Yeah.
Which could make the difference in you're getting through the night and getting on the bus or not, right?
Right.
Or you're making a resume. So that's one cool one. Another one is, what if as you're going through scenes or you're going through, let's just say scenes, and you store your scenes and your faders come up how you want them, right? You could be changing fader banks, but maybe what if you always want one bank to be DCAs or something? So if you did that, if you wanted it to work that way, you could go into Recall Safe. And when you go to Recall Safe, there's this bus and others category. And in there, down here, there's fader bank select. So if you want this bay to not change when you recall a scene, it's always going to stay DCAs, or a certain custom fader bank, might be a smart way to use it, that kind of thing. So those are a couple handy things that are, they're in there, they're a little buried in the case of the bus and others, but really, really helpful. One other real cool thing I'll show you quick is the encoder assign. So I'm going to just get out of this view, and we know we can go to sends on faders in this bay, but on the PM10 and PM7 models, there's a second row of encoders, and there's that toggle there where you can go between 5 different functions, and you set up what those functions are. Well, without that row of encoders, how you go about it? Encoder assign. So typically on our consoles, when you select on an encoder here, those knobs drop down to these encoders. But what if you want to have that other functionality? So encoder assign, there's 5 different functions you can put in here. So right now it's on screen encoders like we would expect, but what if you want to have 12 head amps? Or we could pick analog or digital gain, or we could pick a mix. Maybe you're doing monitors from front of house, and mix 1 is some diva problem child. You could just have that money output channel on the surface at all times.
Right.
So, but you have to remember that when you go and touch that encoder, that's touch and turn now.
Right.
So
but you've got a strip there to let you know, so you're hopefully not going to make the mistake.
That's right. Plus, this is lit up. So, but it's just a way to work differently. It's a workflow thing, but man, it can really speed up your process depending on how you want to work and what maybe during showtime it's one way, and during line check or sound check you set it up differently. But
yeah, and I think some people had reservations about working on the 5 or the 3 because they're missing a row of encoders, but then you walk through that and it's like, oh, well, that's not a big deal. And you can get to any function.
That's right.
With 2 keystrokes. Regardless of what I want to do, 2 keystrokes, where if you're toggling through on the 10, you might take 4 keystrokes to get to what you want to do. So in many ways, this is better.
I think so, yeah. Yep, and it's great. I like it. I wasn't sure I was going to like it. As it turns out, I really like it.
Yeah, that's fantastic.